great. It's a bit like going back in time. About 10 months ago, I was interested in getting back on the table Unconditional Surrender, which I'd set up, good to go, and then I managed to break my leg, which meant things like standing for any length of time or moving around a table with a big map was always going to be a challenge. So it didn't happen. The game got packed away, and it all was quiet for a while. But I've done a bit of gaming since then, some smaller stuff, and I wanted to get back to Unconditional Surrender because I've got some quite fond memories of playing it. I've done some solo and some face-to-face, and I think it works really well. There's a couple of things which I felt could be a bit of a challenge with the game, and one is that of the weather. I sort of touched on this before when I was playing Dark Summer, because although Dark Summer has got the variable weather, it's sort of fixed variable, whereas you've got a finite pool of weather conditions, all of which will come into play, just that the order is unknown. Whereas a lot of other games that rely on a die roll for the weather can lead to a game almost turning after a series of extreme rolls. I know the weather in Normandy 44 is, from memory, purely dice based, as it is in the as published Unconditional Surrender. And when weather has a really big impact, maybe it affects flight. If one side's got air supremacy, maybe it affects the movement, beneficial to the defender or the attacker, depending on good or bad weather. It can really swing a game, and particularly with a big game. To play a campaign game of Unconditional Surrender, it's a big commitment. It's certainly days of play, not hours of play. And if the Germans get a roll in terms of weather on the Eastern Front, I always felt they could almost kill the game off. And conversely, if it goes the other way, it could be a very tough one for the Axis forces. So we had a house rule on trying to limit the extremes of weather, and I noticed that there was a new weather system, a new chart, which I've basically got a big copy of. I think it's in the new play aids now, whereas essentially it's still a die roll, but if you get good weather, for example, if the March turn is poor or fair, so if it's fair in the green zone, which is unlikely but it can happen, then if it's fair in March, it's more likely to be worse weather in April, and that happens on a few occasions. So I think the designers just introduced a little bit of containment into the extremes of weather, which I was keen to try. There's some other little tweaks as well. One was I found that when playing it in the poor weather, you could still do mobile assaults, or you should call them mobile attacks really, which led to multiple die rolls for one counter. It costs you an extra movement point, I think, to do a mobile attack in poor weather, but you could still do 2 or 3 attacks with some of the units. So there was lots of dice rolling, and generally in the poor weather with the negative modifiers, and in severe weather where you halve your combat result, not much happened for quite a lot of dice rolling. So I think there was talk of potentially limiting the combat in the poor weather to just making assaults. The DRM for the poor weather was made a -1, not a -2, but you can only have one attack because it's an assault. And all that seemed to be quite a good way to increase the speed of play, because it's going to shorten the amount of actions that are going on in the poorer weather months and allow you to focus more on the better campaigning weather, which I thought would be an improvement. And the other one that I wasn't too sure about, but I think this is now available. You can now play this on Board Game Arena, and there's been a lot more games played. And I think as a game balancing rule, there's a rule that if you want to, when you upgrade a Russian army into a guards army, that actually takes out 2 of the infantry armies to form 1 guards army. I think when I first heard that, I thought, well, that sounds a bit severe, but I want to see how that pans out as well. So I've got the game set up. I'm just into March of 40, so I've done the first few months. I've forgotten how little happens actually in the first few months. It's a bit of posturing. You're trying to take out Poland in 1 turn. If you don't, it's not a disaster, because you've got time to do it with a second turn. And the other kind of weird thing early on is that you seem to have more production than you know what to do with. There's no sort of investment of production points that are spare into the economy to build factories or to do research, or I think there's an optional rule to potentially bring some of the units that are due to arrive on the order of battle to advance their date by spending some production points. So maybe that's worth trying. But it seems a bit weird that, you know, you've got the spare capacity and you can do nothing with it. Pretty sure that goes away from memory once the thing kicks off for real. You don't have enough production points because you're trying to replace lots of sorties on convoys and air units, and replace damaged units and mobilise new stuff. But it just feels a bit thin at the start as to what to do with it all. So in my game, I've managed to take Poland in the first turn. Denmark has gone. It's been a bit of diplomatic stuff where we've got Hungary's pro-Axis, Italy went pro-Allied, but that's been countered by another successful German diplomatic action. There's a pro-Western marker in Spain, which is could be interesting, and you have this big decision as when to attack the West. I'm going for the traditional, the sort of historical approach, but I'm going to go West first. Don't feel sufficiently comfortable to try anything too crazy just yet. So we got the good weather in March. So it means it's going to probably be worse in April, and I see that as an opportunity to perhaps take out Netherlands and Belgium with the good weather, fairly well positioned to launch that invasion, because that will trigger the West invaded event, which will start to mobilise the French. I think the French get a free air unit which will mobilise. So you can't hang around too much. You need to get a bit of a jog on, because I recall France being quite tough to take out, and certainly a second French air unit along with the British fighter command will make things a little bit awkward. So that'll be interesting. So it's only just about to start for real. There's been a bit of I suppose the phony war, It's all pretty historical. So I'll show you the map, and I'm looking forward to giving it another go. So this is the business end of the map. You'll see that they did declare war on Belgium and the Netherlands, and there are two Panzer armies there. I think they're under the Luftwaffe units. The 5th Luftwaffe just mobilised, not quite fully fresh yet, and of course there are constraints on where the other two. They have to be positioned on the Eastern Front, along with three field units to maintain a garrison. They just need that's left from the attack on Poland. Even though Poland collapsed, they still need to actually enter Warsaw, because it still stays enemy controlled until you've actually been into it. So I just need to move someone in there, which shouldn't be a problem. Probably forgot to do that actually with the lots of the spare production, so I'll probably just get rid of that. Bit of an oversight. So Denmark fell, positioning to probably launch amphibious invasion of Norway. The timing on that is interesting. They've just had their surprise attack marker, so they could potentially do that now, but of course they also need the air to probably support that attack, and I think trying to do both at the same time could be a bit of a challenge. So we're going to focus on the sort of Low Countries for March and take it from there. So yeah, nice to get it back on the table. I've actually got the deluxe hard map, which is quite nice. So there's your footprint. Couple of charts up there, and we're good to go. So I'll update in the future.